Chapter 1. The Getaway. The tires crunched over the gravel road, the sound sharp in the silence of the forest. A blanket of trees stretched endlessly ahead, their shadows flickering over the windshield as the sun began its slow descent. Mira leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, eyes watching the shifting canopy above like it might suddenly part and reveal the answers she'd been avoiding for weeks. "You okay?" Rohan asked, glancing sideways. His voice was soft, calm, too calm. She nodded absently, then forced a small smile. "Yeah, just taking it in." "It's beautiful." Rohan smiled back, but he wasn't fooled. "We don't have to stay long, you know, just a couple of days. Make some food, hike a little, breathe. If you're uncomfortable..." "I'm not," she cut in gently. "Actually, I think this is exactly what I need." But truthfully, Mira didn't know what she needed. After 2 months of sleepless nights, panic dreams, and that constant sense of someone watching her, even in her apartment, she had finally given in to Rohan's idea. A romantic forest retreat, just the two of them. No phones, no work, no people. Just firelight, trees, and maybe some healing. The forest was thick and ancient, the kind that swallowed sounds whole and held its breath for centuries. They drove another half-mile before stopping at a wide clearing near a babbling creek. Rohan cut the engine, and silence flooded in, thick and still. "We're here," he said, grinning. Mira stepped out of the car slowly, feeling the temperature drop. The air had that earthy coolness of late afternoon, and the scent of pine, damp moss, and fallen leaves settled over her. Rohan was already unpacking, pulling out sleeping bags, a cooler, a small cast-iron pan, and a tent. "You brought everything but the kitchen sink," Mira joked, trying to shake off her unease. "Well, I figured if I wanted to impress you with my wilderness culinary skills, I should be prepared," he said, winking. She chuckled despite herself. "Let's see if your wilderness cooking can actually compete with that cafe down the street." "Challenge accepted," he said, standing straight and flexing his arms like a chef warrior. For the next hour, they worked together, pitching the tent, gathering wood, laying out food supplies. Mira tried to focus on the rhythm of small tasks, the ordinary things. But as the shadows stretched and the sun slipped lower, a creeping sensation began to climb her spine. She glanced behind her often. The trees were still. No wind, no birds. Just silence. Rohan was making a fire now. He moved with ease, stacking wood like a puzzle, then striking a match. The small flame took hold quickly, dancing and crackling in the fading light. Mira stood near the fire, arms hugging her torso. "It's quiet here." "It's peaceful," Rohan said, looking up at her. "Not everything that's quiet is scary." "I know," she whispered. "It just feels like the forest is watching." Rohan tilted his head, studying her. "That feeling again?" She nodded. "I've had it for a while, even in the city, but here, it's stronger." He stood, brushing dirt off his jeans, and came to stand in front of her. "Mira, no one followed us. This place isn't even on GPS. You're safe here, with me." His eyes were sincere, steady. That was the thing about Rohan. His calmness wasn't fake. It was the kind that drew her in like gravity. She wanted to believe him, so badly. "I know," she said. "Sorry, I'm probably just tired." "Then let's eat," he said. "Food always helps." As twilight settled over the forest, Rohan unpacked their cooking supplies. Mira crouched by the fire, watching as he chopped vegetables, tossed them into a pan, and added oil, herbs, and strips of marinated tofu. The scent of garlic and rosemary began to fill the air, mixing with the wood smoke. "This smells amazing," she said. "I told you," he said, tossing her a wink. "5-star forest service." As he cooked, he leaned a little closer than necessary, brushed her arm, accidentally, let his fingers linger when handing her a spoon. Mira felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, the one he always caused when he touched her like that. It had been weeks since she'd let herself fully feel it. Her fear always got in the way, but tonight, surrounded by nature and his scent mingling with the fire and food, something inside her began to thaw. "Want to taste?" he asked, holding the spoon to her lips. She hesitated, then leaned forward, tasting the warm stew. His eyes locked on hers the entire time. You win," she said. "It's perfect." He didn't respond immediately, just stared at her mouth like he wanted to taste her next. Her breath caught. But before he could lean in, a sharp snap came from the trees behind them. Both turned. "Probably just a branch," Rohan said quickly, but Mira had gone pale. She stared into the darkening trees, eyes wide. It sounded like footsteps. "There's no one out here," he said. "Maybe a deer or a raccoon." She didn't respond, just kept staring. The warmth that had begun between them was gone, replaced by that cold touch of fear again. Rohan walked into the darkness a few feet, holding up a flashlight, scanning the underbrush. "See? Nothing." But Mira still felt it, that old feeling, that she was being watched. Chapter 2. First Flames. The fire hissed as a log cracked in two, sending a spray of sparks into the air. Mira sat cross-legged on a folded blanket, trying to still the trembling in her hands. She couldn't shake that sound. The snap. Too loud to be a twig. Too close to ignore. Rohan returned from his short search, brushing pine needles from his sleeves. No tracks, no eyes reflecting in the flashlight. Nothing. Mira nodded but didn't speak. Her mind played tricks, layering the moment with flickers of something she couldn't name. A memory that refused to form. "Hey," Rohan said softly, crouching in front of her. "I can take you back tomorrow if you want." She looked at him then, the flames painting shadows across his face. His voice was always her anchor. Gentle, grounded, warm. And for a moment, she wanted to throw her arms around him and just fall asleep with his breath against her neck. "No," she said quietly. "I want to stay. Maybe I just need to face whatever this is." He smiled. "That's my girl." He pulled the pan from the fire, poured the stew into their bowls, and sat beside her. The food was hot and soothing, filling Mira with a warmth she hadn't felt in months. They ate in silence, the forest humming around them with faint creaks and whispers, the night slowly sealing them in. After dinner, Rohan brought out a small speaker, playing soft acoustic music that merged seamlessly with the crackle of flames. He handed her a tin mug of warm, spiced wine and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You look like a forest queen," he said with a smirk. She snorted. "A very anxious forest queen. Still the most beautiful thing out here." She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. "You always know what to say." He leaned in. "Because I always mean it." And there it was again. That heat. not from the fire, but from him. Rohan's gaze lingered, slow and deliberate. Mira's pulse skipped. His hand, rough from tent setup, brushed against her wrist and didn't move away. It was light, but intentional. A question, not a demand. She met his gaze. "You're flirting. Only with your body," he whispered, his voice teasing. "And maybe a little with your mind." She laughed, but it came out breathy. "So bold in the middle of the woods. It's the firelight, makes me think dangerous thoughts." He shifted, one knee between hers, his face a breath away. Mira's heart pounded, not in fear, this time, but with something far more dangerous. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing lightly under her eye. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. But she didn't. Her silence was permission, and his lips touched hers. Gentle at first, exploratory. He tasted like the wine and wood smoke, his warmth melting into her. The kiss deepened. He pulled her closer, his hands moving to her back, her waist. The tension she carried began to ease, replaced by need. His touch was patient, confident, never demanding. Every brush of his lips, every trail of his fingers seemed to say, "I'm here. I want you. You're safe with me." Until another sound. This time, a rustle. Closer. They broke apart. Mira's breath hitched, her body still hot from the kiss. Rohan stood, scanning the edge of the firelight. "Stay here," he whispered, picking up the flashlight again. Mira grabbed her coat, pulling it tight. "Rod?" He said, already moving toward the trees. The flashlight flickered between branches, casting sharp shadows. Mira's ears strained, every heartbeat loud. Then, another sound, a faint metallic clink. Rohan returned moments later, holding something. "Look at this." In his palm was a rusted fork, not theirs. Mira's stomach flipped. "That's not ours." "I know. Someone else is here," she whispered, dread crawling up her spine. "Maybe an old camper left it behind." "Maybe," she said, but the words felt hollow. Rohan set the fork down and crouched again beside her. "I promise, I won't let anything happen to you." She nodded slowly, but her eyes were on the trees now, watching. The fire was warm, his hand was firm on hers, but nothing could shake the feeling that the forest had shifted, that something ancient had opened its eyes, and they were no longer alone. Chapter 3. Whispers After Dark. Mira didn't sleep that night. The wind hissed through the trees, brushing the canvas walls of the tent like ghostly fingers. Each creak of a branch, each shift in the fire's crackle outside, sent a jolt through her. She lay beside Rohan, his arm draped protectively over her waist, his breathing slow and steady. He was asleep. Her eyes flicked to the tent zipper, half expecting it to slide open on its own. The fork. It had been old, dirty, worn like it had been in the ground for years. But the clink it made was fresh, new. She kept going over it, over the snap, the rustle, and that strange feeling she couldn't shake. They were being watched. She turned slightly. Rohan stirred and pulled her closer in his sleep, his chest pressing against her back. His body was warm, his presence grounding, but her mind spun like a wheel on ice. At some point near dawn, she drifted off. A sharp knock. Mira jerked awake, heart pounding. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was. Then she remembered. The tent, the forest, the fire, Rohan. He was already awake, pulling on his shirt and crawling toward the zipper. "Wait!" Mira hissed, grabbing his arm. "Did you hear that?" He paused. Yeah. She could see it in his eyes now. He wasn't brushing it off. He was listening too. The knock came again. Not on the tent, but on a tree. 3 distinct raps. Knock, knock. They stared at each other. "Woodpecker?" Mira offered, her voice barely a whisper. "At dawn," he muttered. "That's no bird." He unzipped the tent slowly and peeked out. The fire had burned down to embers. Mist hovered low across the forest floor. The trees were quiet, holding their breath again. Rohan stepped outside. Mira hesitated, then followed. The knock didn't come again. But in the ash, near the edge of the clearing, Rohan froze. "Mira, come here slowly." She moved beside him and looked down. There were footprints. Fresh ones, not theirs. They were small, barefoot, human, leading right up to the fire pit, and then vanishing. "No tracks leading away?" she whispered, breath fogging in the cool air. He shook his head. "They just stopped." She felt her stomach churn. Who walks barefoot in this forest? Rohan didn't answer. Instead, he crouched and examined the ash. Still warm. Someone was standing here just before sunrise. The mist thickened, curling like fingers through the trees. Rohan stood, jaw tense. "We pack up after breakfast. We'll hike back to the car." She nodded, but as he walked away to grab the cooking supplies, Mira turned back toward the trees. And that's when she saw a shape, white, flitting, like a girl in a pale dress, slipping between 2 trees. Mira blinked. Gone. Her skin broke out in goosebumps. She didn't tell Rohan, not yet. They ate in tense silence. The eggs he cooked were soft, the coffee strong, but Mira could barely swallow. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see that figure again. After breakfast, they packed. Rohan moved quickly, checking supplies, rolling the tent, scanning the woods every few minutes. "Maybe we should tell someone," Mira said finally. "A ranger?" "Let's get out first," Rohan said. "Then we talk." But as they zipped up the final bag, Mira's eyes caught something unusual on a nearby tree trunk. She walked over slowly, scratched into the bark. 3 deep lines. Like claw marks. Fresh. Rohan. He was beside her in an instant, staring at the marks. "A bear?" she asked. "Too clean. Too deliberate," he said grimly. Something flickered in his eyes then. Something Mira had never seen before. Fear. They started the hike back. But at first, it was normal. Forest sounds. Morning sun climbing over the canopy. But the deeper they went, the more off-track things became. Paths that should have been familiar weren't. Trees they passed seemed to repeat. At one point, Rohan stopped and stared at a broken birch. "We passed that tree already." "No," Mira whispered, voice dry. "That's not possible. We're walking in circles." Panic began to rise in her chest. They kept moving, faster. But the forest was different now, hostile. The sun seemed to stall in the sky, the light never quite reaching the forest floor. And the silence, the unnatural quiet, it was back. Heavy, watching. Then, a sound. Laughter? Hi, female. Mira froze, eyes wide. Rohan turned in every direction, fists clenched. It came again, soft, echoing, behind them. They didn't wait. They ran. Branches tore at their clothes. Roots grabbed at their boots. Mira's lungs burned as they pushed through the underbrush. Her heart was thundering louder than her thoughts. And then, the cabin. Small, half covered in vines, wooden and rotting. Rohan skidded to a stop. What the hell? Mira stared at it, eyes wide. This wasn't on the map. The laughter stopped. Silence fell again, but not the safe kind. The kind that warns, you just stepped into something you can't walk back out of. Chapter 4. The cabin with no name. The cabin stood in the clearing like a wound in the forest. Old, decaying, roof half collapsed. The wooden boards were warped and darkened by years of damp and rot. One shutter hung loose, creaking in the breeze. Rohan stepped forward first, cautious but determined. We need to regroup, he said, catch our breath, figure out why the GPS isn't working. Mira hesitated. Her gut screamed no, but her body followed him, drawn by desperation. Inside the forest, they were hunted. Here, at least, it was shelter. The cabin door opened with a moan. Inside, the air was thick and stale, tinged with the scent of mold and forgotten time. The space was small, just a table, 2 chairs, a shattered oil lamp, and a rusted stove. A narrow bed frame stood in the corner, springs exposed like ribs. Mira crossed the threshold slowly. Her eyes were drawn to something scratched into the wall above the bed. She walks when the fire dies. Her breath caught. Iron. He saw it, too, and his jaw clenched. Some psycho's idea of poetry, he muttered. But Mira could tell he didn't believe that. They dropped their packs and sat on the floor, leaning back against the wall. Mira tried to still her breathing, but her heart wouldn't slow. I saw her, she whispered suddenly. Rohan looked at her. Who? In the woods. Just for a second. A girl. In white. Like she was floating between the trees. He was quiet. Then he said, Last night, while you were asleep, I thought I heard humming, like a lullaby. They both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it thick between them. Then, a creak above them. Rohan stood, hand on his flashlight. There's an attic, he said, motioning to a hatch above the bed. No, Mira said quickly. Don't open it, please. He looked at her, surprised by the fear in her voice, but he nodded and stepped back. I won't. Instead, he joined her again, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, wrapping herself in the warmth of his chest. And then, like a dam breaking, her fear dissolved into something else. She tilted her face up. His lips were already waiting. The kiss was different this time, more urgent, more raw. Her hands slid into his hair, his arms tightening around her waist. They lost themselves in the touch, in the heat. The world fell away, the forest forgotten. He kissed her neck, whispering her name like a promise. Her breath caught in her throat as his hand moved beneath her shirt. Every nerve in her body was alive. Every part of her yearned to feel, to forget. But then, thud, above them, they froze. Another thud, then dragging, like something being pulled across the attic floor. They stared at the ceiling. Rohan, she breathed. He grabbed the flashlight and aimed it upward. The hatch in the ceiling trembled. Then it opened. Just a crack. He jumped to his feet, pulling Mira with him. They backed toward the door. Something moved above. Slowly, creaking, deliberate. Then, a soft giggle. Mira shoved the door open and they ran into the clearing, daylight still holding in the sky. They didn't stop. They didn't look back. Branches slapped their faces. Sweat dripped down their backs, but they ran until they reached the edge of a hill and saw the faint shimmer of a road in the distance. A road? Civilization. They broke down the incline, tumbling into dirt and dry grass, laughing, not from joy, but from relief. They made it back, or so they thought. That night, back in the safety of their apartment, Mira curled up beside Rohan on the couch, both of them freshly showered and wrapped in warm blankets. The forest still haunted her, but slowly the adrenaline faded. They sipped wine, listened to soft music. He touched her hair. She rested her head on his chest. "I still feel her," Mira whispered. Rohan didn't respond, but she felt his arms tighten around her. Later, when they kissed again, slow, exploratory, healing, Mira let herself sink into the sensation. The tension between them had grown into something tender, something magnetic, and now it bloomed. He carried her to bed. Their bodies found rhythm, a new language. His hands reverent, her breath heavy and wanting. They made love like it was the only moment left in the world. And when Mira finally slept, her body sated and warm, she dreamed of firelight, of trees, of a pale girl standing at the edge of the clearing, watching her with hollow eyes, or smiling. Chapter 5, A Burn That Doesn't Fade. It had been 3 days since they left the forest, but the forest hadn't left them. Mira stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window. Morning light spilled across the counter, yet she felt cold. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had once felt like home. Her tea had gone cold in her hands. She hadn't told Rohan about the dream, about the way the girl in white had whispered her name. Mira. Soft, sweet, like a lullaby. Rohan entered the kitchen shirtless, hair damp from the shower. "You didn't sleep again?" he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "No," she admitted. "I keep hearing things." "Me too," he murmured. "Sometimes, when I'm brushing my teeth, I swear I see her reflection behind me in the mirror, just watching." He kissed the curve of her neck gently. She turned in his arms. Their foreheads touched. "Tell me I'm not going crazy," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "Because if you are, I am too." His lips met hers again, soothing, grounding. The forest had tried to unravel them, but here, in the safety of their touch, they were still real, still whole. Now, that evening, they met a friend, Anya, a local historian and folklore blogger. Mira had sent her a message asking about legends from the region. The moment Anya saw the sketch Mira had made, the claw marks, the phrase on the cabin wall, her face went pale. "This," she said, pointing to the phrase, "comes from an old village tale, pre-colonial. She walks when the fire dies. That's how they used to warn children not to let the campfires go out. There was talk of a forest spirit, a woman who died in flames, who would rise if the fire ever stopped burning." "Why would she come back?" Rohan asked. Anya flipped through her notes. Jealousy. Rage. She was said to have been betrayed by her lover. Burned alive by villagers. Her ghost haunts the woods, watching lovers. angry, hungry for their happiness. Mira swallowed. What does she do to them? Anya looked up, hesitant. Takes what she was denied. Intimacy, warmth, life. Some stories say she draws them in emotionally before snuffing out their love. Others say she kills the woman and keeps the man. Silence. Rohan shifted in his seat. Sometimes, Anya added. The first sign is a kiss in the forest. Once you share a moment of passion there, she mocks you. Mira felt ice in her veins. She had kissed Rohan there, had craved him by firelight, let herself burn. Is there a way to break it? Mira asked. Anya hesitated. Keep the flame alive. Not just fire, but passion. Protect it. If she senses doubt or fear or drifting hearts, she'll wedge herself between you. And if she already has? Rohan asked quietly. Anya didn't answer. That night, Mira lit a candle by the bed. I'm not letting the flame go out, she whispered, curling close to Roho. He stroked her back, his eyes shadowed with thoughts. You believe all this? He asked. I don't know what I believe, but I believe something followed us. He nodded. They held each other in the dark. Outside, wind rattled the windows, and in the mirror across the room, just for a second, a white shape moved behind them. But they didn't see it. Over the next few days, things got worse. The apartment lights flickered, even after an electrician checked the wiring. Rohan's phone kept receiving blank messages at 2:03 IEM. Mira heard humming from the vents. Then, one afternoon while Rohan was at work, Mira opened her closet and found something tucked behind her old hiking boots. A burned fork, identical to the one she'd found near the fire. She dropped it with a scream, backing away. Her phone rang. Rowan. She snatched it up. Rohan! She's here! She followed us. His voice was calm. Too calm. Mira, I want you to come back to the forest with me. She froze. What? We left something behind. She could hear it in his voice. This wasn't him. It sounded like him, but the warmth was missing. The care. Just emptiness. And then he whispered, She wants to finish what we started. Mira hung up, hands trembling. Using the flame on the candle beside her flickered violently and went out. Smoke curled up into the air, and from behind her, in the shadows of the hallway, footsteps. Chapter 6. The Return to Ashes. Mira didn't remember grabbing her coat. She didn't remember locking the apartment behind her, or racing down the stairwell barefoot and breathless. Her mind was white noise, panic, and instinct driving her forward. The only thing she knew was this. She had to get to Rohan, had to make sure he was still him. The subway ride was a blur, faces turned toward her as if they knew, as if the shadow clinging to her had already made itself visible to everyone else. When she finally reached his office, the front desk receptionist blinked in confusion. He left hours ago, the woman said he had urgent plans in the woods. The words punched through Mira's chest like cold iron. The forest. It was calling him back. It wasn't done with them yet. She drove all night. The winding road toward the edge of the woods seemed darker than before. Every curve swallowed by mist. Branches hung lower than she remembered, like claws reaching for the windshield. When she reached the trailhead, Rohan's car was already parked, beneath the tall pines. Mira's pulse hammered in her ears. The flashlight trembled in her hand as she stepped onto the dirt trail, Every step deeper into the trees felt like surrender. The path twisted and shifted beneath her feet, like the forest was alive and watching. Then, footprints, fresh ones. She followed them, heart in her throat, until she reached the clearing, the same fire pit, the same stones. Except this time, the cabin wasn't just abandoned. It was glowing from within. A low amber light flickered through the broken boards, casting long shadows across the grass. Mira crept forward, whispering his name. Rohan? She pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting on the floor, cross-legged by a fire he had built from the rotting wood inside the cabin. His face glowed in the flames. His eyes were open, but blank. Rohan, she gasped, rushing to him. He didn't look at her, just kept staring into the fire, lips moving in a whisper too quiet to catch. She knelt beside him and grabbed his shoulders. Look at me, it's me, Mira. Finally he blinked. His gaze slowly focused. Recognition flickered. Mira, he said softly. She wants us. Who is she? Mira asked desperately. Tell me, say her name. He doesn't have one, he whispered. She was burned alive in this place. By a jealous lover. He thought she had betrayed him. The fire was supposed to purify her. But she didn't die, Mira said. No, he said, turning toward her now. She became part of the forest, of the fire, and now she wants to burn us too. The wind howled suddenly, slamming the cabin door shut. The fire flared high. Mira clutched Rohan tightly. Then a voice, soft, feminine, broken, came from behind the flames. You kissed beneath the stars and forgot me? They turned together. A figure stepped through the fire. White gown, singed and clinging, hair black as coal, skin pale and cracked, like burned porcelain. And her eyes, empty, hungry. Rohan stood between her and Mira. You can't have her. The ghost hissed. And burn for her. The flames rose. Smoke curled around them like a noose. But Mira wasn't afraid anymore. She lit the last candle she had carried from home, striking a match and shielding it with her hand. We lit a fire together, she said, voice trembling but firm. We kissed with love, not betrayal. This forest is yours, but he is mine. And she flung the candle into the pit. A blinding light exploded. The spirit screamed, a sound that shattered the glass in the lone remaining window. Then she vanished into the rising smoke. The cabin collapsed behind them as they ran, hand in hand, into the trees. The sky began to glow with dawn. The birds sang again. The nightmare was over, or so they hoped. Back in the apartment, days later, Mira woke to the smell of smoke. But the air was clear. Rohan stirred beside her, and on the dresser, the candle she had thrown into the fire, it sat untouched, still full, still unlit, waiting. Chapter 7, Her Flame Never Dies. Mira didn't sleep well anymore. Even with the ghost gone, if she was truly gone, the apartment never felt right. Shadows stretched too long across the walls. Candles flickered without a draft. And sometimes, when Mira passed a mirror, she saw herself pause, but not her reflection. Still, she tried to move on. She returned to her freelance illustration work, while Rohan resumed his office hours. During the day, they acted like a normal couple again. Coffee, cooking, soft kisses in the hallway, but at night, they held each other like a storm might tear them apart. Rohan had stopped speaking about the forest altogether. But Mira couldn't, because she kept hearing her, that voice, soft and broken, drenched in sorrow. He said, "He loved me too." One night, Mira gathered the courage to dig deeper. She returned to her sketches and began to draw the spirit's face again. Her hair, her cracked skin, her hollow eyes. Then she flipped to a new page and let her hand move freely. Without realizing, she drew a man. He wore the markings of another time. Wooden buttons, rough beard, eyes dark with rage. She stared at the sketch, her hand trembling. The lover, the one who burned the woman alive, the one the forest never punished. Mira's mind raced. The ghost didn't want to punish lovers. She wanted justice. She had been wronged by someone she loved, the man, not the woman. And in Mira's time, it was Rohan the spirit had tried to keep, not destroy. The thought chilled her, because if the spirit still lingered, then her story wasn't finished. And Mira might be the one meant to finish it. Rohan found her in the living room, eyes wide with realization, charcoal still smeared on her fingers. "I know what she wants," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "Mira, please don't go back to this." "No," she said. "We're not safe unless we help her move on." "I'm not going back to that forest," Rohan said firmly. "She's still with us," Mira said. "Everywhere. Don't you feel it?" He didn't answer, but the air around them dropped several degrees. The candle on the counter flickered and blew out. It didn't light again. That weekend, Mira returned to the cabin ruins. Alone. The trail was overgrown now, as if the forest had tried to bury what happened. But she found the spot. Charred earth, broken beams. Ash still lingered in the soil. She dug with her hands until her fingers bled. And finally she found them. Burned remnants of a necklace, fused chain, and melted locket. Inside was a scorched photo. Barely visible, but unmistakable. A neon. His face matched the one in her drawing. The lover. She sat there for hours. "I know you weren't evil," she whispered to the spirit. "You were in love. You trusted him, and he betrayed that trust." A breeze rustled the trees. "I understand now," Mira said. "You weren't trying to haunt us. You were begging someone to see you." She placed the locket on the fire pit stone. "Let him burn, not you." She lit a match and held it beneath the chain. As the flame kissed the metal, smoke curled gently upward, not violent, but soft, like breath, like release. And in that moment, a voice passed through the trees. "Thank you." Mira's eyes welled. Then silence. Complete, blessed. Silence. Back in the city, Rohan opened the door as Mira returned. He didn't say a word, just crushed her into his arms and held her tightly. The apartment no longer felt cold. Their bedroom no longer cast shadows. And when they lit a candle that night, the flame danced joyfully, unwavering. For the first time in weeks, they made love. Slow, deep, raw, with relief and longing. No more spirits, no more fear. Just them. Hearts tangled, skin to skin, whispering apologies, promises, and moans that rose like healing into the night. Afterward, wrapped in each other, Rohan kissed her forehead. "He's at peace now," he said. Mira smiled faintly. "Yes, and so are we." Chapter 8. ashes and promises. Life had returned to a normal pace. The days felt warmer. The apartment no longer echoed with the weight of their past fears, and the lingering cold that had settled in their bones seemed to melt away with the changing seasons. But peace, Mira realized, wasn't always as simple as it appeared. She woke one morning to find herself staring at the ceiling, the sound of Rohan's steady breathing beside her, a comfort she longed for during the dark nights. His presence was like a shield, a barrier between them and the ghost that had once haunted their every step. But then, the dream. It had been vivid, too real to ignore. Mira stood at the edge of the forest again. Only this time, there were no flames, no smoke, just the whisper of the wind through the trees. She heard the faint rustling of leaves, the pull of something calling her. She looked around, expecting to see Rohan beside her, but he was gone. Then, from the shadows of the forest, she saw her, the woman in white. Her skin was still cracked, her eyes still empty, but this time her presence wasn't menacing. She simply stood there, waiting. The wind shifted, and Mira could hear her voice once again, this time soft, pleading. I didn't want to be forgotten. Mira's heart tightened in her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The woman held up something small, delicate, a piece of jewelry. The necklace. The same locket she had buried in the forest days ago. It gleamed in the moonlight, untouched by time or ash. The woman stepped closer, and Mira could feel the heat of her presence like a fire that hadn't burned out, but had only been contained for a while. You saved me, the spirit whispered, but you must never forget. Mira reached for the locket, but before she could touch it, the woman disappeared into the mist, leaving only the faintest trace of her warmth behind. Mira woke with a start, breathless and unsettled. The spirit was still with her. She sat up slowly, looking over at Rohan, still asleep beside her. The weight of the dream pressed against her, gnawing at her mind. The necklace, that piece of the past. The next day, Mira went to the forest once more, this time with a purpose. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was left unfinished, something she had missed. Rohan, who had sensed her unease, offered to accompany her, but she declined. This was something she needed to do alone. The forest, now just a patch of green earth and quiet whispers, felt different today. It wasn't as threatening as before, but it held a strange power, a reminder of the things they had overcome together. She found the spot where she had buried the locket, and to her surprise, the earth had shifted. It wasn't just her memory of the burial site. This felt rearranged. She knelt down, fingers brushing the soil, and uncovered the locket. It was exactly where she had left it, but the image inside had changed. The man, the one who had burned the woman alive. He stared back at her, but this time, something was different. His eyes were not filled with rage, they were sorrowful. She turned the locket over in her hands, feeling the weight of its history. The past wasn't something she could easily escape. The woman's plea to never forget echoed in her mind. I won't, she whispered to the air, her voice trembling. I won't forget. As she held the locket, the sun broke through the canopy, casting a golden glow on the forest floor. A breeze swept through the trees, gentle and warm. It was as if the forest was releasing her. She stood up slowly, the locket clutched tightly in her hand. There was nothing left to do but leave it behind. Whatever unfinished business the spirit had, it was no longer hers to resolve. The past was behind them. And yet, something tugged at her, an unspoken promise between her and the woman who had once burned in flames. That evening, Rohan wrapped his arms around Mira as they sat on the balcony, the city skyline stretching out before them. A glass of wine sat untouched between them, the bottle lying on its side. "Are you okay?" Rohan asked softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. She nodded, the locket resting in her pocket, a silent promise between her and the spirit that had once haunted them. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady. "I'm okay now. We both are." Rohan kissed her forehead, his lips. "I'm glad we're safe," he whispered. "I'm glad we found each other," she replied, turning to face him. And in that moment, as they sat together beneath the fading light of the day, Mira realized something she hadn't understood before. The forest had tried to tear them apart, but it had only made them stronger. They were still standing, still breathing, and whatever shadows lay ahead, they would face them together, no matter the flame. Chapter 9. The Final Ember. The days following their return to the apartment felt surreal, like they were standing in the eye of a storm, surrounded by peace, but knowing the winds could shift at any moment. Mira and Rohan lived in a sort of quiet harmony, a rhythm they had built together in the aftermath of everything. But the spirit, though gone, had left something behind, a lingering presence in Mira's heart. It wasn't fear anymore, but a deep understanding. The forest had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and yet, it had also brought them closer. It was as though the fire that had once threatened to consume them had forged them into something stronger, unbreakable. Still, as the days turned into weeks, a sense of unease settled over Mira. She tried to shake it off, tried to push it aside, but she couldn't. Something was shifting in the air, something she couldn't explain. Then, one night, it happened. Mira woke to a soft knocking at the door. It was late, past midnight. The clock on the nightstand glowed dimly, casting shadows on the walls. Rohan was asleep beside her, his steady breathing a contrast to the pounding in her chest. Mira sat up, heart racing. The knocking continued, gentle but persistent. She glanced at Rohan. He was still asleep, but the unease within her only deepened. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and slipped into her slippers, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. She approached the door cautiously, every muscle in her body tense. She hadn't expected anyone at this hour, especially not after everything they had been through. The knock came again, this time louder, more urgent. Mira's hand shook as she reached for the doorknob. She opened it, but no one was there. Her breath caught in her throat as she peered into the hallway. Empty, silent. Then, something caught her eye, a glint of metal on the floor. She stepped forward and bent down to pick it up. It was the locket, the same one she had buried in the forest. Her fingers trembled as she turned it over in her hand. The photo inside had changed once again. The woman's face was now visible, but it was not the spirit's face anymore. It was the face of the man, the lover, the one who had caused the pain. His expression was sorrowful, yes, but there was something else in his eyes now. Guilt. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. The knocking had stopped, but she knew the story wasn't over. Rohan woke to find Mira standing by the door, staring down at the locket in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and realization. "Mira?" he called softly, moving to her side. "What's wrong?" "The knocking," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The locket. It was on the floor. Rohan's face tightened with concern. What do you mean you've buried it? We left everything behind. I thought we did, Mira murmured. But it's back, and I think it's not done yet. He took a step back, his gaze shifting from the locket to Mira's face. What do we do now? Mira closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. We go back to the forest. The forest was different now. Quiet, empty, as if it had been waiting for them. Mira and Rohan walked together, the trees around them whispering secrets they could no longer understand. The air was thick with memories, of love, of loss, of everything that had happened between them. They reached the clearing where the cabin had once stood, but there was no fire this time. No shadows creeping through the trees, just a cold, haunting silence. The locket was still in Mira's hand, the final piece of the puzzle. As she stared down at it, something inside her clicked. She knew what needed to be done. The man in the locket, the lover, had been trapped. He had carried the weight of his guilt, unable to escape it. But the spirit had moved on, and now it was his turn to find peace. Mira stood at the edge of the clearing, Rohan by her side. We have to set him free, she said, her voice steady. Rohan looked at her, understanding in his eyes. How? Mira stepped forward, her hand reaching for the earth beneath her. She dug, slowly at first, then, with more urgency, as if the ground was calling her. Finally, her fingers brushed against something solid, a hidden stone buried beneath the soil. She pulled it free, and beneath it she found a small hole, a grave, shallow and forgotten. The locket seemed to hum in her hand, as if it had been waiting for this moment. She placed it in the grave, covering it with the soil, her fingers brushing the earth one final time. The wind picked up around them, swirling through the trees like a whisper. A voice, soft and full of regret, echoed through the air. Thank you. The forest seemed to exhale, the air clearing, the oppressive weight lifting. The trees no longer whispered with anger or sorrow, but with peace. The man's spirit, at last, was free. Mira and Rohan stood together in silence, the last of the shadows fading as the first light of dawn broke through the canopy above. It was over. Back in the apartment, they sat together on the balcony. The city skyline spread out before them. The breeze was warm, carrying the scent of the trees they had left behind. Mira held Rohan's hand, feeling the pulse of life in his touch. She looked at him, a quiet smile on her lips. We've been through so much, she said softly. Together, Rohan replied, his eyes filled with quiet affection. Mira closed her eyes, leaning against him. The forest, the fire, the ghosts. They were all behind them now. They had survived it all, and now there was only the future. I love you, she whispered. Rohan kissed her forehead, his voice full of warmth. I love you too. They held each other as the sun rose higher, the promise of a new day ahead of them. The forest had burned, but their love had survived. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The end.